Screams shook the Galactic Council's hallways as a massive beast, its jagged fangs gleaming, tore an alien delegate apart while 250 others stood frozen, until a lone human stepped forward and scratched the predator under its chin, turning the monstrosity into an oversized, docile kitten purring in the blood-soaked chamber. Edward Taylor, the grizzled human space marine responsible for the bizarre sight, had just arrived on the Barzan homeworld, met by wary glances and palpable tension from the mixed alien crowd unaccustomed to humans. The Earth Defense Force had dispatched Edward to an emergency council session, but he knew more was at stake than simple talks. Keed, his cool Barzan liaison, had revealed the grim purpose behind the gathering. A seemingly indestructible creature, immune to all weapons, was terrorizing multiple worlds, killing thousands. In desperation, the Council turned to Earth, their last hope. Humanity, known for its tenacity and unorthodox tactics, was tasked with stopping the beast or facing dire consequences for failure. As Edward exited the chamber with keyed alarms blared, the creature had come to Barzan's capital. But while others cowered, awaiting Earth's aid, Edward charged straight toward the sounds of slaughter. He had a job to do: pet the damn thing. Edward raced through the ruined streets of Barzan's capital, with Keed close behind him, heading to where the predator had been sighted. The devastation took their breath away as they reached the outskirts. Collapsed buildings, burning vehicles, rubble everywhere. The roads were empty of life, the creature's handiwork. A huge shape moved in the shadows of a demolished structure. Edward and Keed froze as it emerged, a hellish hybrid of reptile and insect. Its cluster of eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence as it spotted them. Edward pulled his plasma rifle and fired, but the bolts ricocheted harmlessly off the beast's thick armor. Gripping his vibroblade tight, Edward ran at the monster, searching for gaps in its defenses. The predator attacked in a lightning blur, its claws slicing the air inches from Edward as he frantically dodged and ducked, relying on a decade of training to survive. Keed shot at it with his Barzan energy lance, but the creature's unreal speed let it evade every searing blast. As he fought for his life, Edward saw the predator protecting its chest. There could be a vulnerability near its neck. He moved left, then abruptly lunged right, stabbing his vibroblade hilt deep into the beast's torso. The predator screamed in agony and thrashed, trying to rip out the blade. Keed seized his chance and fired into the wound, the energy burning deep. The creature staggered drunkenly, slowing, and crashed to the ground. It lay still. Edward and Keed approached warily, shocked to realize it was unconscious rather than dead. Fascinated, Edward touched its hide, feeling the intricate scale patterns. The predator's eyes flew open with a guttural growl. They tensed for another fight, but it just looked at them, almost respectfully, before standing and limping off. Edward and Keed stared after it, stunned, both wondering what the hell just happened. News of Edward and Keed's harrowing fight with the predator exploded across the Galactic Council. The chamber roiled with debates over the creature's fate. Hawks called for an extermination campaign. Others demanded capturing it alive to uncover its secrets. As the arguments raged, Edward's comm chimed with a message from an unknown sender, promising intel on the beast. Edward told Keed to gear up. His partner frowned but nodded. They were going to meet this mystery informant. The coordinates led to a dive bar in the grungy industrial zone ringing Barzan's capital. Edward pushed through the crowd of unsavory aliens to a corner booth. A grizzled, scar-faced Krellian waited there, nursing a drink. He introduced himself as Zax. "I hear you've been tangling with a Kryn," Zax said. "Nasty customer. Most think they're just monsters. The truth is they were the guardians of our galaxy once." Edward leaned in. "What happened to them?" "Wiped out centuries ago. See, a bunch of races figured the Kryn were sitting on some big secret, tried to beat it out of them. The Kryn wouldn't break. War went on until only a few were left." Keed rubbed his chin. "And the survivors are lashing out now. Why?" "Protecting the secret to the grave. Those monsters are smarter than most people. This might be their last shot." Edward and Keed raced back to the council with Zax's revelations, but they found the place in an uproar. The warmongers had launched an all-out assault on the Kryn's lair. Edward pushed through the chaos to the councillor's platform. "Oh, you can't do this," he shouted. "The Kryn aren't animals. Killing them is short-sighted. Their knowledge could change everything." The lead councillor glared at him. "The decision is made, Terran. We will eliminate this threat." Edward turned to Kide. "I'm taking a ship. Don't try to stop me." Kide threw up his hands. "You're going to get yourself killed. For what? Some fairy tale about ancient secrets?" But Edward was already running for the hangar. He leaped into the first attack craft he saw and punched the thrusters. The ship streaked through Barzan's skies, chasing the Council fleet's ion trails. He could only hope he reached the Kryn in time. At the Predator's lair, Edward jumped out, sprinting through the twisting tunnels until he reached the central chamber. The Kryn crouched there, its armor pitted and scorched, and clutched beneath its bulk, a clutch of metallic ovoids, eggs. A searing beam split the air, barely missing the Kryn. Edward looked up to see Council fighters swooping in, raining fire at the cornered beast. He leapt without thinking, throwing his ship between the Kryn and the attacking craft. The fighters swerved but kept coming. Edward stood before the snarling Kryn, hands raised. He thought of Zax's story. He had to try. Focusing on the Kryn's eyes, Edward tapped his chest. "Friend," he said, praying it understood. "Not enemy, friend." For a long moment, the Kryn stared him down, jaws dripping. Then slowly, incredibly, it straightened to its full height and nodded. The Guardians, it seemed, still had a chance. As the Council fighters circled menacingly above, weapons trained on Edward and the Kryn, a small craft burst through their formation. It was Kide. He leapt out, sprinting toward Edward, a datapad clutched in his hand. "Ed, you won't believe what I found," Kide panted, thrusting the pad at him. "Nexus Biotech's been playing us all. They want the Kryn for some kind of super soldier program." Edward's eyes widened as he scanned the files. Genetic experiments, bioweapon schematics, the evidence was damning. He looked up at the gathered Council ships, jaw clenched. "Nexus has been manipulating you," Edward shouted. "All of this was just a front to get their hands on the Kryn." Murmurs of shock and outrage rippled through the Council ranks. Some called for an immediate investigation. Others doubled down, insisting the research was vital for galactic security. As the debate spiraled out of control, Edward turned to Kide. "We can't let Nexus get away with this. I've got a plan, but I need your help rounding up anyone on the Council we can trust." Kide nodded grimly. "You can count on me." Hours later, Edward crouched in the shadows outside Nexus Biotech's sprawling research complex, a hand-picked team of human operatives and loyal Council members at his back. At his signal, they moved in, breaching the perimeter with practiced efficiency. But Nexus was waiting for them. Alarms blared as heavily armed security forces poured into the corridors, plasma fire crisscrossing the air. Edward and his team pushed forward, trading shots and taking cover where they could. As they fought their way deeper into the facility, the true horror of Nexus work revealed itself. Containment tanks held twisted Kryn specimens, their bodies warped by brutal experiments. Computer banks detailed plans for an army of weaponized abominations. Bile rising in his throat, Edward downloaded the files. They had to get this out to the galaxy. A hail of blaster bolts cut off their escape. Edward spun to see a hulking figure striding through the smoke, a cruel grin on his scarred face. Zorn, Nexus's chief enforcer. "Going somewhere?" Zorn smirked, leveling his plasma cannon. Edward charged, zigzagging as Zorn fired. He slammed into the mercenary, the two of them crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs. They traded bone-crunching blows. Edward's combat training matched against Zorn's vicious strength. Zorn's fingers closed around Edward's throat, slamming him against the wall. Stars exploded across Edward's vision as he scrabbled desperately at Zorn's grip. Suddenly the pressure vanished. Edward looked up to see Kide standing over Zorn's crumpled form, the butt of his rifle still raised. Council reinforcements poured in behind him. "Cutting it a little close there," Edward coughed. "Oh, you know me," Kide said, helping him up. "I like to make an entrance." In the aftermath, Edward stood before the Kryn, the weight of everything he'd seen heavy on his shoulders. The council, now freed from Nexus's influence, watched in stunned silence as he made his proposal. "For the Kryn aren't weapons or resources to be exploited," Edward said, his voice ringing through the chamber. "They're a sentient species with a culture and history we can't begin to understand. They deserve a future, just like us." He met the Kryn's eyes, seeing the glimmer of hope there. "I asked the council to establish a protected sanctuary, a place where the Kryn can live in peace and share their knowledge on their own terms. Because if we can't learn to coexist with the wonders of our galaxy, then what hope do we really have?" The Kryn stirred, rising to its full height. It placed a clawed hand on Edward's shoulder, a gesture of trust and gratitude that needed no translation. The council chamber erupted in heated discussion as Edward presented his case for the Kryn sanctuary. Many voiced doubts, citing security concerns and lingering mistrust. But as the evidence of Nexus's crimes sank in, the tide slowly turned. The vote was close but clear. The Kryn would have their refuge. Edward threw himself into the preparations, working closely with the Kryn to design a habitat that met their unique needs. As they labored side by side, the Kryn began to open up, sharing glimpses of their culture and abilities. Edward learned of their empathic bond, a connection that once made them sought out as diplomats and advisors across the galaxy. But he also saw the scars left by those who exploited that gift for selfish ends. As the sanctuary neared completion, Edward sensed a growing unease among the workers. Whispers reached him of threats made by those still harboring hatred for the Kryn. He doubled the security, but nothing could prepare them for what came. The attack was sudden and brutal. Armed extremists poured into the compound, firing indiscriminately. Edward rallied the defenders, fighting through waves of assailants to reach the heart of the sanctuary. Amidst the chaos, he lost sight of Kaid and the others. He could only pray they were still alive. Smoke choked the corridors as Edward battled his way forward. He had to reach the Kryn and their precious eggs before the attackers did. But as he arrived at the central chamber, his heart sank. The adult Kryn grappled with a massive, scarred human, both locked in a vicious duel. The man could only be the extremist leader. Edward leaped into the fray, raining blows on the leader. For a moment, it seemed they would overcome him. Then a plasma bolt seared the air, striking the Kryn in the chest. Time seemed to slow as the noble creature collapsed. Edward caught the Kryn, cradling it as its life ebbed away. In its final moments, the Kryn's mind reached out, enveloping Edward in a cascade of memories and emotion. He saw the Kryn's ancestors, revered as sages and healers, their wisdom sought by all. He felt their pain as they were betrayed, hunted, driven to the edge of extinction, and he understood with blinding clarity the tragic cycle of fear and ignorance that had led to this moment. As the Kryn breathed its last, Edward wept, his tears mingling with the blood on its shattered carapace. The extremist leader lay dead nearby, but there was no victory in it, only loss and the bitter knowledge of what fear could wreak. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.